Hi there, kids. It's time for reading. I'm so excited because our book is really interesting. It is entitled Little Mouse Was, written by Paul Choy. But before we go to the story, there are interesting pictures about mouse that I would like to share with you. Have you seen a pirate mouse? Or a mouse that can stand up? A mouse that can play basketball. A mouse that can use a skateboard. A mouse that can paint. And have you seen different colors of mouse? Here they are. And do you have any idea what mouse eat? Okay, here. They can eat fruits, grains, and their favorite food, cheese. They can eat nuts. And they always steal our bread. Am I right? Mom and Dad always get angry with these mouse because they always nibble wires. They also love corn and cereals. So you have to keep your cereals properly. And now it's time to go to the story. This is the story of a little mouse who discovered that all he had to do to be happy was be himself. There was once a little mouse who lived in a little hole. The little hole was in a little tree, and the little tree was in a little wood. It happened that little mouse had never met any other mice, and as there were no mirrors in his little hole, he had no idea who or what he was. But one thing little mouse was completely sure was that he wasn't meant to live in a little hole forever. Because little mouse knew deep in his tiny mouse heart that it was his destiny to be big. So one day little mouse decided to leave his little hole and discover the world. He packed a little bag full of all his important mousy things, and off he went as fast as his very little legs could carry him. After many days of traveling, he came across a zoo. It wasn't actually very far from his little wood, but little Mousie only had very little legs, so everywhere seemed quite a long way. Little Mouse had never seen anything like the zoo before. It was so different from his little hole. It was full of the most amazing, wonderful, and enormous creatures he had ever seen. Little Mouse saw a great big lion pacing up and down, showing off his great big sharp teeth. He saw a gigantic giraffe stretching out her gigantic neck to eat the leaves from the top of a gigantic tree. And he saw a ginormous eagle unfolding his ginormous wings. It was obvious to little Mouse that this was where all the big creatures lived. And he knew deep in his tiny mouse heart that it was his destiny to be big. So he decided right there and then that this was where he was going to live. The only trouble was that because little Mouse had no idea who or what he was, he didn't know which one of the animals he should live with. Maybe I am a lion, thought little Mouse. So he ran over to where all the the big lions lived in a great big cage surrounded by great big bars to stop the lions escaping. Being so small, Little Mouse slipped through the bars to meet the great big lions inside. Taking a great big breath, which isn't actually very big if you're a little mouse, he let out the biggest roar he could. But because he was such a little mouse, all that came out was a tiny squeak. All the great big lions fell about laughing. Thought Little Mouse. Maybe I'm not a lion. Maybe I am a giraffe. So he ran over to where all the gigantic giraffes lived in a gigantic cage surrounded by a gigantic fence to stop them escaping. Being so small, Little Mouse wriggled straight through the fence to meet the gigantic giraffes inside. Standing as tall as he could, he reached for the leaves on the top of the gigantic trees. But even on tiptoes, he could only reach the grass growing around the trunk of the tree. All the gigantic giraffes fell about, laughing. In that case, Little Mouse thought, I must be an eagle. So he ran over to where all the ginormous eagles lived, in a ginormous cage covered with a ginormous net to stop them escaping. Being so small, Little Mouse easily passed through the net to meet the ginormous eagles inside. Determined to fly, he jumped in the air and flapped his little mouse legs as fast as he could. But, try as he might, he just kept falling over on his bottom. All the ginormous eagles fell about, laughing. Just then the zookeeper came along to close the zoo for the night. First, he went to see the great big lions, who were still laughing at Little Mouse's feeble roar. The zookeeper put a great big lock on the great big bars, which stopped the lions being able to run around and explore the countryside. Next, he went to see the gigantic giraffes, who were still laughing at Little Mouse standing on tiptoes trying to reach the top of the trees. The zookeeper put a gigantic lock on the gigantic fence, which stopped the giraffes being able to reach the juiciest leaves just outside the cage. Lastly, the zookeeper went to see the ginormous eagles, who were still laughing at Little Mouse trying to fly but falling on his bottom. He put a ginormous lock on the ginormous nets, which stopped the eagles being able to fly high, soaring through the sky. The zookeeper was just about to leave when he saw Little Mouse. "What are you doing?" said the zookeeper. "This zoo is not for a little mouse like you. Shoo!" "Little?" said Little Mouse to himself. "You mean I'm not big?" Looking around, Little Mouse realized that, out of all the animals in the zoo, he was the only one small enough to slip through the bars, wriggle through the fences, and slip through the nets. Suddenly, all the other animals stopped laughing. They were all locked in the cages staring at Little Mouse, who was free to go wherever he wanted and explore the world. Little Mouse fell around laughing at how lucky he was to be so small. He realized he didn't need to be big. He was a little mouse, and being little was all he needed to be happy. And so Little Mouse picked up his little bag containing all his important mousy things and left the zoo, running as fast as his very little legs would carry him. He ran all the way back to his little hole, in his little tree, in his little wood, and he promised himself that from that day forward, he would just enjoy being a little mouse, the very best little mouse he could be. And that's the end of our story. Hope you like it. See you next time.